Hey everyone, this is Scott, and today we are going to process that image of the San Diego skyline. You saw the In the Field episode where I went out for this shot of the skyline and spent, the better part of an hour, half hour before sunrise, half hour after sunrise, taking a bunch of images from the same location. And the reason I did that is so I could blend some of these together in post. I can get the look that I wanted and really get as many of those city lights as I could before they get turned off or washed out as the sun comes up. So let's head over to the computer and we will take a look at the process that went into creating the image.
So here I am in Aperture, and you can see I have a few shots that I've taken, starting with the earliest ones from the early morning, and as the sun came up, taking more and more of them and getting more light into the buildings. And so what I'm going to do is choose a few of them, and I'm going to get these three that I've flagged. The very dark shot, a shot that I quite like on its own, and then one with the very bright buildings. I'm going to bring these into perfect layers and blend them together to get one image that I can stylize. In perfect layers, I have the three images, and I've arranged them in a particular order. This one here, this is my base image. I like the tone of it overall. I like this hint of motion in the water here. This next image on the stack, this is the darkest frame, so I'm just going to label this dark. You can see that these buildings here are a little, they're underexposed. But what's nice is there's more lights in the skyline. And then this last layer, which I don't even need to name it because it's so obvious, this is the brightest image well after the sun had come up, and it just started to touch these buildings a bit. And I'm going to use this in a moment or two to bring a little life to the skyline. So let me start with the base layer and the dark layer. I'm doing something very simple here. So if I turn this layer on, it's showing me the entire dark layer. Turn it off, and all I'm seeing is base. I'm going to change the blending mode to lighten. Now this is really, really subtle. I want you to watch top of this building, middle of the harbor, and this building over here as I toggle it on and off. You're going to see some of the city lights come on, and you're going to see this building change colors here. What the blending mode is doing is it's saying, show me all of the, or only display the pixels that are the brightest in this layer as compared to the base. It's a great way to bring in city lights. And I probably will do a more in-depth video on this blending mode at some point soon. We merge that down. Now I want to do something similar with this top layer here. I want to use these buildings to bring in more brightness and detail, but I only want it for the buildings. So the very first thing I'm going to do is mask away everything I don't need. Grab the quick brush, make the brush a little smaller so I can get in between the buildings. I'm going to get rid of this boring sky, just like that. Let that go do its thing. Okay, and that left some patches in between the buildings. I'm just going to use the perfect brush right here, and I can make my brush size pretty big and just sweep down in between those buildings there and zoom around the edges just to get in everywhere. Make sure that I've gotten all of that sky out of the way. I'm not being very precise. I'm not worried too much about shaving off bits of buildings. You can see here I caught a little bit of the top of this tower, and over here I caught a little bit. And that's okay because I'm not going to be doing a lot of detailed masking, and I don't want a sharp edge. I actually want a pretty dull edge. So that looks pretty good for the sky. I'm using, by the way, Command M to turn the mask on and off. And for the water, that's really simple. I'll grab the masking bug, linear bottom, drop it on the harbor there, and that's pretty fine. I don't need a whole lot of feathering here. I just want to isolate the buildings. Now this layer only has the buildings. Again, I'm going to choose the lighten mode, and what lighten is going to do, obviously lighten the buildings. It's also going to bring in a few more city lights on some of these buildings on the right, as people woke up or people came into work, they started turning on their lights, And the last thing is just now adjust the opacity of this layer. And I'm just going to play around with this a little bit until I get something I like. Somewhere in this area looks pretty okay. Just giving a little touch more of brightness to these buildings. I'll probably leave it maybe a little bit on the bright side because my processing will tend to darken this. So that's the blending. I'll merge that down. And now this layer is ready to be stylized. So I'm going to flip it into a smart layer, and then I'm going to send it over into effects. Right, in effects, we're just going to do a few touches to this, and it's really going to be quite straightforward. Make these buildings pop and deepen the blues in the sky just a bit more. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is get rid of this navigator off of our screen here with Command 1 or Control 1 on a PC. Just hide that so we can have a little more space and see what these filters are doing. I'll start with the tone enhancer, and I immediately don't like what it's done. I like the dark moodiness of it, so I'm going to turn off the auto setting and keep the tone that I kind of started out with, blending things, but I want some detail. And so I'm going to pop detail up, about 20 is fine. And I really only want this for the buildings. So I will grab the masking bug, switch the shape to reflected gradient, and drop that on the scene. And I'm going to align the first bar with just about the bottom of the harbor, and then the second bar just about the top of this main tower. Now what this is doing is removing the tone enhancer, the detail I added, from here. I want to invert that. So up in the menus, mask, invert. And now we can see nice detail in the skyline. We're keeping the water soft and the sky soft. Okay, next up, let's take a look at color. I want to make the sky a lot more blue. So I'll grab a color enhancer. And there's a filter in here, turn off auto, that is perfect for the sky enhancer. This is going to amp the blues up a lot. And this is really looking nice. What color enhancer is doing in the sky enhancer preset, it's manipulating the aqua color range. You can see it's shifting it very blue and increasing saturation. It's also manipulating the blue color range, just making it a lot more saturated and bringing the brightness down a little bit to give it that deeper, inkier blue. Now the only thing I don't like is that these buildings that are more in shadow are becoming more blue. When we toggle that on and off, they're just getting a little bit too deep. So what I will do is mask away the color enhancer from the skyline. And honestly, the simplest way for me to do that is the same way that I did when I did the masking in layers. I'm going to remove everything. I'm going to remove it all from the sky because this is just one big nice uniform color essentially. And then I'll invert the mask when I'm done. So let's get that out of the sky with the quick brush. Okay, there we go. I'll check the mask with Control M. Actually looks pretty darn good. Okay, and then I will grab another bug here, linear bottom, drop it right at the bottom of the harbor, and that's removing it from the harbor itself. I want a very narrow feather because I want those blues to come back into the water when I'm done. And now I'll invert that mask. Invert. And I have a suspicion I'm going to use this mask again. So I'm going to copy it now so I have it at the ready. But now we can see that's made the sky and the water nice and blue, and it hasn't touched the buildings. So if I toggle that on before and after, that looks really good. Okay, onward to dynamic contrast. Now we're going to make that skyline really pop. Dynamic contrast, and when I'm adjusting this, I'm only paying attention to the buildings. I'm not looking at the water, I'm not looking at the sky, and just play around with this a little bit. Maybe a little bit more in the mediums. What's large going to do for me? Nope, I liked it the other way. Yeah, it looks good. And so now to apply this only to the buildings, I'll paste down that mask I had copied before. It's going to remove it from the buildings, and I'm going to invert that. So now it's applied to the buildings. And one thing I want to make sure I'm careful of is I don't get an artificial halo around any of the buildings. And those look pretty good. I'm not seeing anything terrible. Let me zoom in here. Make sure I don't see any type of haloing there. No, that looks good. So And let's see, zoom out, option click. Ooh, let me do command 0, recenter ourselves. All right, I think I'm also going to take a look at sharpening just to give those buildings a little more punch. That's actually pretty hard. I'm going to back off the layer opacity some, maybe around 40. That looks nice, just a touch on the buildings. And then the last thing, I'll finish it off with a vignette. And actually, I kind of like subtle. Let me also try Big Softy. I've been kind of a fan of that one recently. That's a little bit too dark for this one. Let me go back to subtle. But what I will do is play with the brightness a little bit, bring that down some, so it really focuses it in right here in the center of that cityscape. So there we go. At the end of all this, there's our before, and there's our after.
So that is it. The magic of this, if there is any, is the blending. Blending these different images together, and then once you've got a good composite of all the different elements that you want in your frame, bringing that into a program like Effects and adding that stylization, and focusing in this case with the nice reflection on the base of the water and a pretty uniform sky, really making those buildings pop. That was where a lot of the contrast and the sharpening, that's all going into the buildings themselves and leaving the water and the sky very soft. Hope you enjoyed this. I hope to see you again. Again, comments on the YouTube channel, subscribe, tell a friend, send me questions. Love hearing from you all, and I will be back again next week. Thanks very much.